So there are two words that recur, over and over again in Rav Shagar's writings, from what I've read. One is beitiut, which is kind of loosely translated. We've been years trying to figure out a sense of homeness, and another word which is kind of mashma'ut, personal meaning. And I think when I read them, they seem to contradict in some deep way, because for Rav Shagar, beitiut means I'm doing mitzvot, studying text because it's me, it's my essence, it's my home. I come home because that's me. It's not, I don't have to justify it every time. I'm not seeking personal meaning when I come home every second. It is meaningful, but it's who I am, And so that's beitiut. Halakha and Torah mitzvot is yourself. That's enough of a reason. On the other hand, mashma'ut, personal meaning, is such an emphasis in Rav Shagar. It's the more existential side of him, that every text should be about teaching you personal meaning. You should be going out of your way to find a lesson for your life. So can you talk a little bit about that tension between, Torah, spirituality being your home on one hand, something that you shouldn't, it's just self-evident, that's who you are, and on the other hand, going out of your way, deliberately trying to make it about meaning?
So I think that there's a sort of complex interaction between the two ideas, the sense of feeling at home in Torah and halakha, and the sense of looking for personal meaning. There's definitely a tension, as you said, but also beitiut, the sense of feeling at home, provides the platform for finding meaning. Finding meaning is always what's meaningful to me. And so the question is, who am I? And Rav Shagar said that in the 21st century, Jews really, much more than ever before, became people of the Torah, but also people of the secular world. So we're not just people of the Torah, but a very important aspect of who we are is being people of the Torah, and not just letting ourselves be defined by the Torah, but actively seeking out a relationship with Torah where we're not just confronting it, but we let it seep into our bones and let it really become the background of our life. The problem, though, is that when something's the background, it's the thing you take for granted. It's not just not meaningful, it's the least meaningful. But what it is, it's the ground for meaning. Meaning always takes place within a certain context. So what Rav Shagar wants is for you to be working off of a context of Torah, and then looking for meaning. And that does mean, he says, that you will often feel the sort of excitement of meaning, specifically not in Torah. Because if you're rooted in Torah, you're almost always going to find it elsewhere. And vice versa. The saying is, the grass is always greener on the other side. The strange is always the most exciting. And that's part of why Rav Shagar, really found meaning in secular philosophy and even science fiction. Seems to have been a big fan of science fiction. But he still wants us to look for the new and exciting parts of Torah, the things that can speak to us anew, that aren't just the background. And he wants us to return to our background and look for things that are exciting and meaningful and speak to our, everyday existence and things like that. So on the one hand, as we learn Torah, it in a sense becomes less meaningful as it becomes more ordinary and regular and taken for granted. But and Rav Shagar celebrates that, but he also wants us to try and return to it with fresh eyes.
Well, let me kind of respond to that in my own struggles. Studying Rav Shagar, he has this I would say it's quite a I don't want to say controversial, but it's a frustrating passage that Rav Shagar writes. I think it's on his drashot on Hanukkah, where he says that a person wakes up and prays and goes to Shacharit, and even if he didn't have any deliberate kavanah, spiritual focus when he was praying, just woke up, did it almost robotically. This is kind of the energy of the piece. Rav Shagar would say that's more meaningful than if he would have all these Kabbalistic or spiritual intentions when he'd be praying. And on the one hand, when I read that, I would say immediately I felt repulsed, turned off. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be this rabbi that's obsessed with the quest for spiritual meaning in Judaism, and you're seemingly trying to convince me that the most normal version of Judaism is actually the deeper. So that's the bayit for Rav Shagar. That's the home. And so how do you explain what he is excited about there. What is it that Rav Shagar likes about that routine sense of this is who I am, that is almost deeper than the person who says, this is the goal of prayer, I'm going to focus on the words and make it meaningful. Why is the first deeper than the second?
Well, first off, just because you mentioned the text it's from a drasha called Halacha, Halicha Ve'emunah in the book of Chanukah Drashot. It was also published in English as Halacha as a Way of Life in the book Faith Shattered and Restored by Magid Press. I think it's part of a broader idea. You mentioned that the tension between baitiyut and mashmut, between feeling at home and feeling a sense of meaning, may be connected to sort of difference between postmodernism and existentialism. And personal meaning is very much something you find Rav Shagar focusing on more sort of existentialist drashot. And baitiyut and feeling at home is certainly more of a function of postmodern sort of drashot. Those not exclusively. There is a interplay between the different ideas and different texts and things, but that text in particular, where he talks about, you go to the Beit Knesset, and he's worked off the Mishnah Berurah, which says if you put on tefillin in the Beit Knesset without, any intention whatsoever, it counts as having fulfilled the mitzvah. And Rav Shagar is at a point in his thought where he's really focusing on what it means to be a person is not to be an isolated individual. That who we are is always a function of and in context of our way of life and the people around us who share that way of life with us. And he says, emunah, faith, in a certain sense, it's not something that is within the individual, that it's, within my heart and my mind. It's something that's embedded in the framework of a culture. And that as much as I have faith, I have a culture that is faith. That a embedded aspect of my culture is ideas like God is one and God exists and things like that. And I think when you really consider questions of, who am I and to what degree am I shaped by those around me, to what degree do mitzvot and things shape me, then it can often be much more powerful to see faith not as something I have decided on or come across, but as something that makes me who I am. And I think that's really where he's finding excitement in that idea.
In what sense? That it makes me who I am because I'm part of something greater than myself, or it makes me who I am because I've done it since I was a child? What is the excitement of praying shachar with no concentration? Or you don't have to use that example. If somebody's listening, you put on tefillin your whole life, or study Torah every day. Rav Shagar's in this piece, he really is saying, even if you didn't have specifically, you did not have intention. You're doing it because you did it yesterday. Because this is the opposite of the Kotsk. You're doing it because this is what it means to be Jewish. That is exciting for Rav Shagar. And it's a departure from definitely the existential kiyumi look, search for every mitzvah speaks to me on a personal level. I'm finding every text to be deep. The bite for Rav Shagar in a lot of his pieces takes on almost a more sophisticated look than kiyumi. It's almost like, I remember when I first started studying Rav Shagar, I was kind of like put off by his criticism of Rav Kook. Because I was coming in with this very idealistic feeling of everything's meaningful, everything's beautiful, because Rav Kook really just portrays Judaism as absolutely everything is the deepest. And Rav Shagar, with his such honesty, says, well, this doesn't work for people, this doesn't work for people. And yet, instead of saying, therefore don't do it, he says, and that's okay. It's okay that it doesn't have that high meaning, and maybe the high meaning is not even the best. So again, I keep coming back. I guess we're not going to really answer in this talk now, but it's a really interesting thought of Rav Shagar that if anyone's listening, to think about, that Rav Shagar is excited actually by that normalcy and that almost like family feeling. I am part of the Jewish people, and that's what the Jewish people do.
So I would just want to add that I don't think he would say it about tefillah. He's talking about tefillin. He has some other ideas he comes back to repeatedly about tefillah. but I suspect he would not be as okay with, davening without any kavanah. Yeah, I think your point about honesty is a really important part there, because part of what's going to happen for Rav Shagar is always like, if you think something is true, then that's what matters, and he's going to find meaning in that. So the fact that people don't necessarily find meaning in, and great personal existential intention and meaning in tefillin every time, they often put it on by rote, and the way that actually shows that tefillin isn't just something they choose to do, it's actually a part of who they are. The fact that that's, simply a fact, that's true, is part of what pushes him towards that idea.
I'll just add this metaphor I was thinking of while you were speaking, kind of like wearing a wedding ring. Obviously you could give symbolic meaning to it and what it represents, and there are all these Kabbalistic explanations of what a ring represents. But in the end of the day, if you're being real with yourself, you wear a ring if you're married and you don't think about it most of the time. And maybe that's actually a deep thing, because this is part of who I am now. I'm married, and the person I'm married to is part of who I am, so much so that I don't even think about it consciously. But that's not less deep, that's more deep, in some sense.
Right. I think marriage in many ways is actually a metaphor that Rav Shagar comes back to often. He also speaks about it directly, but he'll also apply it to other situations. And what he says is that, there's something truly amazing about, he thinks of it as sort of face-to-face, romantic, excited passion, where you and the person you fall in love with are the most meaningful people in the world to each other at that moment. But he finds that there's a higher level that he says is not facing towards each other, but holding hands and facing outwards towards the world, focusing on some third point that is the shared project of building a home and participating in life and things like that. And that's very much connected to this halacha as a way of life model. The things that I'm not facing but are right beside me are in many ways the most important to me. And that's something he finds very powerful.